Welcome everyone. Glad to have you here and on the stream with me today. Appreciate taking the time. Hopefully I can deliver some value for you. Today what we're going to be talking about is something, again, that I think a lot of contractors, especially the contractors that are struggling under a million, really get wrong. And if it's not corrected, if you don't understand it, we can spend a exponential amount of time stuck in that place, right? So no doubt the hardest leg of your business is from that $0 to $1 million. Everything begins to get a lot easier after that. And what most contractors just really miss, especially out the gate, is what few things they should focus on. And they tend to focus on too many other things that really don't have a tremendous bearing on their business. So I'm going to deliver to you what the business blueprint is that we try to implement with our newer customers, and how it could work for you. If you're here, I can only imagine that in one way or another that you're in some sort of pain, you feel stuck. All right. You may be stuck under $1 million, which I would say is the hardest place to be. $1 to $2 million. Again, this is the hamster wheel. This is where you really find out who's who. Getting through this phase, again, can often feel like just survival. $2 to $3 million. This is where really a new problem emerges. And I would even extend this a little bit further up and say I've experienced it myself between 2 and 5 million. All right, where you've hit the ceiling, you've plateaued in some areas of the business. All right, and you're really looking for that next step for growth. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. A lot of what I'll be sharing with you are principles and their bedrock systems that I've proven myself in having a business that's done $10 to $15 million for a number of years. Hopefully there's no fluff here for you. Above that $5 million, it really becomes, again, about refining systems and people. All right. But it's a lot easier. All right. A lot of doors get open at that point. So we should all be striving, again, depending on your market, depending on your business and your goals. All right. To get into that, I'm going to say over the $3 million mark to really experience freedom. Okay. Out of curiosity, before I go any further, how many of you guys are at that $1 to $2 million? Just throw a 1 in the chat if you're comfortable. Let me know how many of you guys are in that $1 to $2 million range. All right. Okay. Even that 2 to 3-ish area, a lot of this will apply for you. Okay. So we often experience this. We're working harder every year. Again, it feels like we're making progress. It's going to be much different than when we started day one. All right. But 82% of contractors find their first plateau, their first barrier. We almost call it a crisis. All right. At that $1 to $2 million mark. And they kind of never break through. What ends up happening is they have some setbacks, they have some problems, and they begin to play a lot smaller. They find these barriers and they start to make some excuses for themselves of why they can't go further or if they even want to. And I hear this quite often. A lot of contractors, especially if they've had, a particularly rough ride, we can really feel, that really feel the defeat at this level. All right. And this is really what this whole presentation is aimed at. And again, it can apply further up. All right. But where we want to really be focused is that 40% margin jump. Okay. So rather than focusing more on growth, getting above that $1 to $2, $3 million mark, that can't be the primary goal. Okay. And the mistake you make is chasing the revenue. Revenue is vanity. Okay. It doesn't really matter unless you're actually profitable. So knowing your numbers, having a full picture view of where your target customer changes everything. All right. So if ever there's a time and opportunity, we want to really be focused on our margin. All right. Is at this stage. And then if we haven't been entirely focused, we've just been trying to grow revenue, trying to survive, getting customers through the door. All right. What we have to do at this stage, and it's probably the most, helpful thing, is we have to look at our customers very carefully, especially if you have reoccurring customers, the type of customers that you're getting from referrals, however you're bringing in your customers, we have to really take a careful look. And I'm going to share a really good resource for you guys in the chat here. All right. But we have to prune. Okay. And it may seem like what I'm saying is crazy and that it's not possible. And I can just imagine all the excuses I've heard. All right. But if we really take a careful look at them and decide if that bottom 40% of your customers are actually helping you to grow or if they're hurting you. And in most cases, especially when we don't know our numbers well, all right, I'm going to say that most of the time you've got customers that are bringing your business down and will prevent you from growing. All right. If you're doing any sort of subcontracting, again, highly prevalent in that space. Okay. But when we take a better look at them and we decide, and again, it's really understanding who you serve best and who can actually afford to pay for your services that you want to offer. Okay. So a good example of this is, again, we have a customer that's high demand, right? Has a lot of needs. Okay. They also are the ones that are asking for heavy discounts. And what ends up happening is you find yourself in that lower margin group. All right. So, and it's kind of funny how it works. The jobs that are, you can feel going into that they're going to be a problem. All right. End up being the least profitable jobs. Okay. And that really sets the business back. All right. That's really, a big problem, especially again, if you're getting into reoccurring customers. All right. Or a group of referral customers that you were unable to attain your margin goal. Okay. Well, who do you think they're going to refer you to? All right. So the system I'm going to share with you, I'm going to throw it in the chat first so everybody has the tool. All right. But we're really going to take a careful look and we're going to rate our customers A, B, C, and D. Okay. Super important because at this stage is where we want to understand our customer the best. All right. And as you grow, what you're going to find, all right, is it's not working for a variety of people. You want to reduce variables. All right. And the best way I can explain this, I have the same customer that I do business with day in and day out, and I can describe them quite easily, right? They're a doctor, lawyer, engineer. They live in homes above 2.5 million, right? They drive luxury cars, wear name brand clothes. All right. They live in a couple of particular neighborhoods that we target. All right. And anybody that's not in that category, anybody that we can't qualify to being in that range, we don't do business with them. Okay. We simply say no. All right. In fact, 50% of the leads we generate get the answer no. We don't even quote them. All right. And just to go one step further on what I'm talking about here. All right. If I were to call my business right now and ask for a quote, I wouldn't qualify. All right. I'm not the kind of customer my business wants to do business with. Okay. So I don't want to work for another contractor. All right. I know that, in that setting, there's just not a great match. Okay. And the way we want to offer our services doesn't fit that type of person. Okay. And that type of person being me. Okay. So again, that may be a little strange to hear, but ultimately I want you guys to question, like when you set up your business and you think about the person that you want to do business with, how many of the characteristics that you have are in that customer? All right. That can be hurting your business all on its own. All right. Meaning, and when you really kind of take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, would I buy my services? Would I pay, a 40% margin to have me do the work? And if the answer is maybe or no, all right, you're going in the right direction. If it's yes, okay, we have to take a step back and really start to think about that avatar, all right, and who we want to do business with. Okay. What we find, all right, is a lot of guys, almost everyone that we start to work with, first thing we're doing is getting to know their numbers, having them understand their numbers and understanding all of the different variables that affect true margin and what profitability should look like. Okay. And of the hundreds of contractors we've done this with, all right, over 22% are below a fair value. Okay. If they're not in a complete loss altogether. And that's what the average contractor charges versus what their work is actually worth. So meaning you have 22% more to come up in your margins, right? So think about that. Everybody sitting here could probably add 10% to their margin without losing a single customer. Does that make sense? All right, great. I'm just going to put you guys on pause for 1 second. Oh, all right. So again, how do we start to align ourselves with the right customer and what should the mindset look like around it, right? So I want to know how many of you guys have done any of these things. All right, just out of curiosity, throw one in the chat. Worked harder every year, but revenue plateaued anyways, right? So again, working harder and harder, but still kind of at that revenue plateau. Still doing 100% of the quoting yourself and you're 5 years plus into the business. How many of you guys haven't been able to relinquish that yet? Okay. Get 100% of your leads from referrals, no other pipeline. Okay. Turn down a 200K job because we're too busy. Who's had that experience? Right? Haven't raised your prices in 2 years. Said that I'm going to expand when I'm ready, 3 years in a row. All right. How many of you guys started this year off with the goal of growth? All right. I don't think too many contractors, at least that we seem to encounter, all right, are looking to reduce their business. Okay. Now that could probably very much occur, but I think for the most part, if you're here, especially, we're looking to grow. And I want you guys to really keep that focus on margin, right? So growing is relatively easy these days. Okay. There's never been an easier time to grow revenue, all right, meaning to acquire work. But as contractors, we obviously know that doesn't mean anything. Anybody can give away work. Anybody can give away their services. All right. We have to make sure that we're maintaining a margin. All right. So to start with, again, we have this margin in mind, right? Let's say that our goal is a 33% net profit. Okay. So after everything, all right, we're left with 33%. To put that into perspective, again, if we were to do $1 million worth of business, okay, we'd have $330,000 to show for that work. Okay. And is anybody here in that range? Is anybody here achieving that standard? Okay. No, it's fine if you're not. You would be very unique as well if you were in that. Only about 7 or 8% of contractors ever get to that range. All right. So meaning, the majority of contractors that you're out there competing with, all right, are usually in between the 1 and 8% net profit at the end of the day. Okay. That's a pretty scary figure for how much we put into these businesses and how much risk we're taking. All right. For you doing under $1 million, you would start to question if that's, if you'd be better off just getting a job, right? So where do we start? Where do we start by, getting a control of this? All right. And this is really the simplest, easiest way that I can bring it forward to you. All right. Is we're probably going to kill our bottom 40% of clients. All right. So to grow, we have to cut loose the clients that are no longer serving our business so that do not add value. Okay. And again, like I said in the chat, we should have a system for doing this. All right. For rating your customers, I highly, highly recommend that you guys involve this in the beginning of your business. All right. Get into the standard of firing customers. All right. Customers that are not serving the business and are not helping to grow. It's much easier to find the right ones and hold on to the wrong ones. Okay. The next one is, again, the fear of raising your price. Okay. And we've done this repeatedly with customers where we raise their price 10%. Okay. When we do that, they now have to do 33% less work in order to make the same amount of money. Okay. So just think about that for a second. Would you like to make more, if not the same, and do less work? I'm assuming there's nobody opposed to that. Okay. But really what it's going to do is it's going to force you. It's going to force, the market, all right, to direct you to customers that are going to help your business grow long term. Okay. It's going to force that to happen because anybody that's expecting services below that simply aren't going to do business with you. And that's a good thing. All right. It's also going to force out some other things that will have to change, right? With a higher margin, better marketing, better systems, better delivery to your customers. All of those things become more of a focus. Okay. Instead of just being the lowest price. All right. Nobody wins there. Okay. So I would challenge everybody on this call today to take one action step. Every single person here can do this today. All right. And you can test this whole theory. I want you to raise your prices 3%. All right. Just 3%. Immediately raise your prices 3%. Go in and change your templates, your logs, however you're pricing, right? Add 3%. Okay. And watch the amount of conversions that you're having. So the number of sales that are converting. All right. I bet you it goes absolutely. If it doesn't go up, all right, it'll stay right where it is. Okay. For the most part, as I've said, on average, you're probably 22% below market value anyways. Okay, for the average contractor. So meaning you could probably add 10% if you're really brave today and see no effects to your business whatsoever. All right, no drop in customers. Okay. Again, when we want to offer a multi-crew on every job. Okay. Being able to produce more work more efficiently. Okay. When we raise our margins, we get our price back up. It gives us more room, all right, for project management, for other things that occur in our business that are, causing us to get dragged, right? If you're able to do that, okay, we can also hire a closer and get you out of sales, right? Most contractors I encounter have next to zero sales skills, all right? Most contractors don't even recognize that sales is a skill. They just think it's something you do, okay? If sales is not in your zone of genius, it's not something you enjoy doing, right? It's something you don't like, all right? My recommendation is to start to move towards removing yourself from that process, because you'll never actually achieve the levels that you could, all right, if you hate doing something, all right? If your zone of genius is in operations and managing a business and maintaining it, good. You want to spend the majority of your time doing those type of tasks, okay? So in some cases, it's hiring a closer. The next, very simple, and in this order, all right, we need a lead machine, predictable leads, okay? And like I've said to you in the very beginning, for those of you that are living entirely off referrals, okay, I really challenge you to start to diversify the way that you're acquiring customers. It is the game changer. It is the difference, all right, between getting to your goal and not, all right? Because there's a limited amount of referrals, okay? And I hear guys wear this on their chest like a badge, okay? Great. But maybe you have a sustainable business at $1 million worth of referral offers, but you add some of these other pipelines to it, and you start to increase with a healthy margin to 2 million, all right, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, all right. You basically, as long as you're maintaining that margin, as long as you have that profitability there, you can grow indefinitely. And what happens, again, what you begin to see, all right, is that it's far easier to grow in this format than it was with the referrals. You're constantly playing feast and famine, right? We don't want to leave our business up to somebody else. Okay. So I'm going to stop real quick. If anyone has any questions on what I'm discussing, or if they're confused, put up your hand, throw a comment in the chat. Happy to answer anything. Bought leads in the past, always spent more than I made. Okay. Get this a lot. First problem. Okay. The very first problem here is buying leads. All right. When you're saying buying leads, I'm assuming that we're talking about something like Angie's List or, somewhere along those lines. Okay. The problem with those services, number one, all right, and they're absolute vampires. The reason why, all right, is you're buying a lead from a company that's selling it to 6 other contractors. Okay. So think about that for a second. Every single lead you're acquiring, they're actually the touch point. They're the developer of the lead. They can also cannibalize your market. So if you're selling a lead for $600, all right, to 6 different contractors, do you think that customer that's, inquiring about those services and getting 6 quotes you have more competition than the one that just is looking, that came across your lead already and you're a single source? Of course. Of course. Here's the other problem. Long term, you are feeding these companies, all right, to drive up the market value so that you can't even advertise. And we see this in all types of markets. When I can sell a lead for $600, all right, I can basically afford to pay $300 for that lead and be profitable. Okay. Meaning, if you want to come into it, all right, you can't afford to pay $300 per lead. That would be a very high cost to acquire a customer. Okay, that's the first thing. So do not use those services. They're terrible. And again, of course, you're going to be in a price sensitive market. I've seen them work out, but I'll say for the 90%, it is an absolute, you may as well burn your money. Okay, which leads back to the first one. Okay, it's about sales. It's about presentation. It's about understanding exactly who your customer is. All right. If we're just running around throwing out prices, okay, we're not really demonstrating value. Okay. And I think that's the most important thing to understand is that these days, all right, more and more so, customers are expecting speed and convenience. All right. That's one way to demonstrate your value. How quickly are you able to get to the quote? How thorough are you? Okay. Number two to that is, again, understanding the whole sales process, right? When we're presenting, how we build our offers. Okay. There's a whole there's a whole host of things that we have to be considerate of, or else you end up coming to the door, all right, like every other contractor that comes through their door, and all they've got is to say, hey, you can trust me. I do great work. I do quality work. Okay. All right. Customer hears that. Next guy comes to the door and says the exact same thing. All right. Third contractor, same thing. All right. What decision at that point do they have to make? How are they going to decide? They're only going to decide on price because that's the only value that they've been offered. All right. So again, the best way to explain that is if you're just selling services, you are a commodity. All right. It's available to anybody. Okay. And a customer sees you as that. You've built no value. Okay. The same thing goes for the guy that, believe it or not, all right, is the lowest or the middle price. There's actually no strategic value to that. All right. You're putting yourself in the average range. All right. So you're forcing that customer to consider on price. All right. Now, the alternative to that, okay, is to be 10% different or unique, understand that customer's needs even better than they do. Okay. Have the skills to bring that out, have the skills to actually properly sell for the modern world, not just pitch our offers. Okay. And you will see a dramatic difference in your business. I promise you that. Okay. One of the most important skills to continuously learn and build onto is how we sell. And it goes all the way down the line in how we offer, how we have a customer trust us even throughout the job. Okay. And again, another fine example of this is from the second that customer has a call with you or acquires for, a lead or becomes a lead in your system, the clock is ticking. Okay. The expectation is very high because all of our society is being trained and programmed that way. All right. How many of you guys have bought from Amazon recently? Okay. Grandma's using Amazon, right? That wasn't available 10, 15 years ago, right? But what is it? It's setting the bar for. Everybody's looking for that same sort of experience. And if you're not offering that to them, all right, your sales process is clunky, takes too long, they get frustrated that you're putting decisions on them. All right, they're simply just going to ignore you and go to the person who does. And that will be the leader, in your market. The ones that offer the most speed, convenience, and build trust early. Okay. Key factor there. Don't just show up and expect that your quality work is going to get you anywhere, because it doesn't. Everybody's heard that. All right. So again, let's get back a little bit to, these first steps, because this is one thing that especially if you don't have a source of leads that's consistent, that I see guys struggle with the most. Okay. And again, there's going to be some pain there for sure. All right. But when you fundamentally systemize how you work with somebody or what you accept, and you create a boundary, all right, your business will change. The reason why is because, and I'll put it to you the easiest way I can explain this. We have never in entire history, okay, been in a more abundant time. And especially for a contractor, think about the opportunity that's in front of everybody here today. Okay. We can literally pay to get leads, good quality leads. We can have endless amounts of opportunity. If you look around, even in a 10-kilometer radius from where you stand right now, there is more work than you can ever imagine doing. Okay. There's also, all right, and here's the kicker. We're in a labor shortage. We're in high demand, and we're going to continue to be in high demand for the foreseeable future. Okay. So as a business, all right, you have to understand that there's so much opportunity. Here's so much potential to grow. All right. The only thing holding you back from getting to that is the mindset first, right? Are we in that, that mindset of, there's not enough, right? Or are we really seeing the big picture and understanding that, hey, there's actually way more than I can do. And it's better for me to start setting the filters and the screens so that I'm only dealing with the customer that is the easiest for my business to work with and that I make the most amount of margin on. All right. If our mind is not going that direction, all right, and we're not finding that place, okay, you're going to struggle. All right. If we're adding services, we're not consistent with what we're offering. All right. You're adding variables to the business. It's becoming more complicated to run. All right. And a lot of you guys are going to go through this in the early stages of your business. But again, the method to this, okay, the way to start doing it is figuring out who that customer is. And it's not, when you start to go through the exercise, you will be shocked. Okay. The customer giving you the most amount of work. All right. But paying late, cutting you down on the margins, you're having to give heavy discounts to that are the most demanding. All right. You may be sad to find out that, hey, you know what? They're ranked maybe a C or a D when you really look at it from a data perspective, and you shouldn't be doing business with them. They're actually hurting you. All right. But we end up hanging on to them and losing other ones that would be, far better fit for us because we're not willing to make those adjustments. We're not willing to, look at the truth and look at the data to make a more informed decision. All right. We're using emotions to run the business, and that's not going to serve you. Okay. So again, when we keep the money, we drop the pain. All right. The same crew, same capacity. We raised our prices even in small increments. Okay. I know a lot of people are sensitive around how much they're charging. Oh, I can't charge that much. Bullshit. Okay. I can prove it to you over and over and over again. All right. You may have that problem currently with the way that you operate your business, but with some changes, all right, and a better understanding of who's willing to pay for that service, okay, things become a lot easier. Okay. So again, the clients that refer you more, they refer you more to people like themselves. Okay. Do you think that somebody in a high net worth, all right, somebody that has, certain values and principles and is easy to work with, okay, understanding, and you know who I'm talking about. We all have that picture of a perfect customer in our mind, perfect job, perfect project. Okay, no stress. We're able to produce it, made a, really fair profit. They're happy, we're happy. Who do you think they refer you to? Do they refer you to that penny pinching class D customer that's going to give you nothing but headaches and problems and call your office every single day? Hell no. Hell no. All right. On the contrary, all right, I think I see a lot of contractors that have actually developed their business around serving these kind of terrible customers. The ones that are always, price sensitive. And, the best example I can share with you right now is, anybody here worked for an investor? Anybody here worked for investors or have that as a part of their portfolio or have experience doing that? Okay. Yeah. All right. What's the problem with working for an investor? Flipping houses. What is the problem with that? What is the issue? Anyone? I think it's glaringly obvious. Their focus and their primary, in order for them to remain in business, is to earn a profit. Okay. And to make the most amount of margin possible. Okay. So you're the contractor doing all the work. Where do you think they're going to take that from? Are they going to allow you to make a retail value on their below market value project? Hell no. So what do? They prey on contractors that are just starting. They look for guys that are unsure of their numbers. They know what the retail value is. They know how much it would cost them. In fact, they sit around and joke about it. Yeah, retail value on this project could have been 200,000. I found some schmuck to do for 120. All right. And they negotiate and they make you feel like you're the man until you get all that work done and you realize, I made zero. I basically worked for wages. Okay. That's a perfect example. And no matter what, they'll sell you. They'll convince you to work with them. And again, everything's good in the beginning until payments start being late and, all the list of other problems that go on like that. So again, learning the word no in that situation and getting yourself out of scarcity. Okay. And that's the big word here is, when we're at that stage, when we're just starting out, everything is typically scary. All right. Even I work with guys that are 20 years in and they're still in that scarcity mindset that I have to take everything. And there's going to be all these repercussions and side effects to me raising my prices and doing all that. That is all bullshit. Okay. Stop it. That's a scarcity mindset. And as I just explained, we are in the most abundant time and place to be a contractor. There's never been an easier time to be successful as a contractor. All right. So again, getting back to, the next moves that we've got to think about, repricing to a premium, right? Same trades, better clients. When you price higher, you get better clients. Did anyone connect those dots? Anyone figure that out yet? All right. The person willing to pay more or a premium, all right, tend to be better customers. All right. They have less complaints. All right. They're more concerned about the value that they're getting with you. Okay. So again, it doesn't mean that you can just, carry on business as usual if you've been built for budget, all right, and you've built your business around being the cheapest guy, you're gonna have to step your game up for sure to keep them happy. But most of it, okay, is in the communication and the way that you're conducting the transaction with them. Okay. It's not actually doing the work any differently. It's not actually how much or how hard you have to work. All right. It's all the things that make a business or a brand. That's the selling point. All right. Are you providing peace of mind? Are you giving them, an end-to-end easy project? Have you thought about their experience in working with you? Okay. Again, if the answer is no to that, and you're not even sure who you should be doing business with, and you've never gone through the activity of running a checklist and checking through your customers, all right, you're going to have a lot of baggage that you're carrying forward. And again, the worst part of it is, all right, if you've built yourself for budget, if you've built yourself to be competitive, all right, unfortunately, when you do find that ideal customer, somebody that would pay you 20, 30% more as a premium for the peace of mind, all right, you're probably not going to be too attractive to them, right? And that's where we get into that revolving loop where I hear most contractors, and here's the harsh reality, and I'll just give it to you straight as I can. The guys that tell me that I'm already charging the most. I can't raise my prices. Are you crazy? I'm already charging the most. All right. Already, again, if we were working with them, we know their numbers. Okay. The reason they can't charge the most or charge any more, all right, is simply because they are working with the wrong customer. All right. And they've put themselves in that loop. So is it true? Absolutely not. There's always a consumer that will pay a premium for your service. Always somebody that will pay more for something if they feel there's better value. Okay. So when we focus on that and less on where your price is, focusing on real true numbers, all right, you start to cut through the noise. You start to cut through the bullshit. You get rid of the emotional gut decisions. All right. The guessing. All right. Start running your business like an actual CEO. So again, when we raise your base pricing to match the top 25%, not the average. Okay. So again, looking at contractors, and I want you to think about this right now. Like, who has a contractor or somebody in their market that is doing what they want to do, right? They have all the new trucks. They have, the customer base. They're doing the high end, projects, right? They have the manpower, the workforce. Okay. Do you think they did that by competing on price? Very rarely. Very, very rarely. Okay. There's only a few markets where that's going to be successful. And even that, okay, what's the point if you're doing it all for low margins? All right. That's not sustainable. That's not something somebody's going to buy from you one day. Okay. You are strapped to that baby. Okay. So again, I want to get a little bit more into what the look of value is. All right. Selling value, demonstrating value versus offering services. Okay. So again, if you were to raise your prices, let's say 25, and you got up to that top 10% of contractors, all right, promise you there will be, again, we're not talking about 2 or 3% here. We're talking, 15 to 22, and you're really in that high margin where you're retaining 33% margin on your projects. Okay, that is considered top professional service. Okay, that's a good return. All right, and if you can do that consistently and knowing your numbers, all right, that's a very scalable business as well. All right. But what do those companies do? The ones that are doing it, that is different than, let's say, the bottom 15 to 20%. We already know the first one. They're charging more. That's easy. Okay. But how are they convincing a customer that they should work with them over the guy that's cheaper? How do you think they're doing that? How do you think they're building value? Okay. I can give you a couple of clues here. All right. The first one. Okay. What goes out after somebody makes an inquiry with you? What goes out? Which introduces your services to them, all right, before you even open your mouth, right? So imagine a new lead comes in with our company and with most of our customers, we're sending out a capability statement. We're making it really, really clear who we work with, how our services work, what they can expect, right? We have some videos in there. We answer their commonly answered questions, all right? We book their appointment and make sure that it's on their schedules. Okay. We answer everything through some videos and as well as our capability statement. Right up the bat, they got our reviews, our referrals, our reviews, the type of work we've done, case studies. Okay. Why? Because we already know they've already more than likely checked us out. All right. But we're adding to that. All right. We want to make sure that we're directing our energy towards the biggest concern they have first and foremost. If money's not the object, all right, trust and value are. Okay. So we want to build that up. Okay. The next thing, when we show up to their home, we step in their home, we've thought about every step of that process, every step of engaging with a customer. We're not just giving them quotes and emailing them to them or showing up, looking at the job, and then sending an email quote 3 days later. You want to sell value, you're not going to do it that way. All right. By then, somebody like our company's already been there and closed the deal, shook the hand and collect the deposit. Right. We're showing up to close deals. All right. With that said, again, I'm a metal roofing contractor for anybody, that's maybe familiar with that market. All right. Our sales team, all right, is not allowed to leave their house unless we've done an attic inspection. All right. We use infrared guns. We really get to how and what kind of problem they have, if they even need a metal roof or not. Okay. We've also taught all our guys how to listen and talk less, to really understand the problem before you open your mouth. Okay. How to position, the company. If you can imagine, you've had 3 roofers that came in, all of them just threw numbers at you. All right. No one really took the time to explain, why they needed something, or more importantly, to demonstrate, to actually, for us in our situation, to demonstrate our value by getting in their attic, right? Looking for problems that they didn't even know they had. All right. We all finish it with how we offer. We do a good, better, best, right? We're not just giving them one lump sum price with, some vague description of what it is. No, we don't do that, right? We walk them through each piece. We make sure that they have good, better, best. Why? We want to fit their budget, right? We want to understand where they're at. Okay. So that we can position the offer that best suits them. We can solve their problem, right? We also give ourselves 3 opportunities there. All right. Now, if somebody's, too price sensitive to afford our just our good, all right, that's no problem. But what have we done in terms of positioning ourselves? And I'll tell you exactly how I know that our system works well. Over 40% of my leads that come to my business today come from people we never did business with. Okay. Meaning the experience they had from, inquiring with us to, us delivering a quote or delivering a proposal to them, I should say. All right. Was so good that even if they got their roof done by somebody else, all right, they still referred us. Okay. How many here can say they have that same experience? How many here can honestly say that? Okay. And again, am I doing every one of these? No. We have a full sales team. They all follow the same proven system over and over again. It's very boring.
Change the fan box?
Give me 1
Is
second.
that all we're doing, or are we doing more than that? Adding wire?
Okay. So again, big difference for a lot of how you guys are doing business, right? And how you think about your business in general. Right? Once again, here's the other side of things. A lot of contractors and companies as a whole, like when you're profitable, when you've charged a premium or a higher margin, can you afford to get better crews? Can you afford to pay a little bit more than the average market value is to your subs, maybe to your employees? Is there a strategic advantage to doing that? Can you be more selective? Can you can you have more options in the type of people you're going to do work with? Of course you can. Okay. In fact, again, you're going to sell that. That is your value as well. All right. Having the best subs or having multiple subs, not just one, tired old painter. All right. One tired old drywaller that just, throws numbers at you. He's cheap, but, does, have to have 3 or 4 callbacks to get anything done. Right. That's not a good value. All right. We want to work with somebody that's prime. Well, we can only do that, right, if our margin allows us. Okay. So I want you to think about that. Right. Having a really good workflow, right? This is where we get into the business side of things and how organized your business is. As a general contractor, all right, I work with a ton of general contractors. All right. Your job is not to actually do the work, right? We're there to manage, supervise, communicate. All right. Budget. Okay. Lots of protections there as well. But you've got to make sure that you're aligning yourself with the right people, right contractors with the least amount of risk. All right. This requires you to operate a business like a business. It should be systemized. It should be efficient. It should be fluent. All right. We want to have repeat crews, but we want to have a more predictable offer. Okay. So if you're struggling in this area, if you're having a hard time finding good guys, as we would say, there's no good guys. There's no good crews. I have heard it on and on and on. All right. Again, where are you going to start with fixing that problem? All right. Very simply, if you can pay 10 to 15% higher than, what the next guy to you is, all right, you'll find yourself not having this problem anymore. Okay. And you can demand more. Doesn't mean that you make less profit. All right. You're going to make the same profit. You're just going to have less headaches. All right. And it's having that understanding of what value really is. Okay. And, another way to look at it, would a customer rather work with your company that can get a job done professionally with no callbacks in 2 weeks? All right. Or take a chance on the lowball guy that's going to take a month or a month and a half. And he's doing the work himself. So who knows what you're getting? What do you think the value is? Okay. So again, we're going to touch on this one really briefly. For a lot of you guys, if you don't resonate with what I just went through in terms of how a professional sales team should operate, or that you aren't doing at least a few of those minor things, okay, and you really have no interest in selling, all right, you feel sleazy doing it or whatever other mindset thing that you have, okay, I would highly recommend, all right, that you start removing yourself from that role. If it's truly taking your energy away and it's not giving you energy, okay, you know that you need to get yourself to a point or a position where you can do that. Okay. Lots of ways that we can also supplement. All right. Having a good sales process doesn't always mean that we have to have a person on the other side. We're moving more and more towards having a digital sales process. Okay. We can speed things along. If you're an electrician, a plumber, there's lots of technology that's available now where we can quickly do it. So we don't have to drive out to their home. We can jump on a link and be right inside their house and walk through their problem, give them a price before the first guy's even, started his truck to go and see them and close the deal. Okay. So there's lots of very intelligent ways that we can improve sales. Okay. The other way we can do it is we can develop ourselves. Okay. In the situation, all right, where it's, again, you have the option and the ability, all right, getting a closer or somebody that's dedicated to your sales only will see growth in your business. All right. Vice versa. Okay. If you really do love sales and you are resonating with what I'm discussing here, all right, and that's your zone of genius, all right, my suggestion to you is to get rid of all the operations. Okay. To remove yourself from the day-to-day grind of everything else, because the way I've seen it and the way that I've experienced it, there is actually no higher ROI value than to sell for your business. Okay. Especially in the early stages. And it's just money and cents. When you sell the job, let's say you've sold it for a 30% margin, right? You've already earned the profit. Everything else after that is an expense, including you. All right. Meaning that there's a limit to how much you could pay you to do what you're doing. All right. So again, as a salesperson for my business, I have an unlimited, amount of money that I could earn. an unlimited amount of value I could offer. And it's going to be a lot better because I'm skilled with it. All right. Then, and even if I was the worst at it, I would still make more money on paper. All right. Than being the supervisor for my projects, being the PM. All right. And if you don't see that math, again, I would get more into understanding your numbers. Maximum, let's say you're the best project manager of all time. You're the top dog. There's no one that can do it better than you, no one that ever will. Okay, cool. All right, that's your identity. All right, you have a maximum amount of value that you could be worth. Maybe you're worth $100 an hour. Okay, let's just say we're going to give you $100 an hour because you're so good at it. All right, you're still capped. That's the maximum amount of value that you can earn in your own business. Okay. But what about the rest of it? So when I go out and I sell a project, all right, I'm going to spend a tenth of the time that you will. All right. And again, I could make two, three, four, five, $10,000 an hour if I'm, the better and better I become at it. Okay. And you want to look at it the same way. It's got the least physical labor involved, does come with some skills and some learning. But again, if you're in the early stages of your business, this is where your mind should be. And there's only two ways to grow a business. There are only two ways. We can only do it through marketing and sales. All right. So if you're not investing in this side of it and you're just on the operations, and I would say the majority of contractors that I encounter and work with, service-based companies, architects, they're stuck in doing the work, right? They're stuck there and they wonder why they're stuck. Why isn't the business growing? Right? I'm doing all this work. I'm running around wearing all these hats. Okay. All right. Could you find somebody to do it, half of your price? Absolutely. Okay. Could I find a good PM? Maybe not the best like I am, but I could find a PM that does about 90% for $50 an hour. Hell yeah. All right. What would that free my time up? Doesn't mean you're off the hook. All right. It would free my time up to increase sales by 15%. There you go. Right? Problem solved. Right? Or hire someone to do that. Okay. But oftentimes we get stuck. And that's what this is all about. Figuring out those clench points where we have to be focused to get unstuck. Okay. Again, like I just shared, hopefully I don't sound like a broken record. We only have two ways to grow a business. That's marketing and sales. All right. What often gets the attention, gets the time, gets the energy is, selling, right? We're estimating and selling, right? We're running out, giving customers quotes. All right. But then there's this leaky problem that we have, this other issue that requires us to hustle. All right. And I can only describe it that way. If we're living entirely off referrals, all right, that is a perfect, clean example of what hustle means. You have to hustle, right? Because you don't know when your next one's coming, right? You don't know. You have to deliver like unbelievably to that customer so they refer you. Okay. So oftentimes we're customizing our client experience to them specifically, right? That's basically like building a whole new business. All right. On the other hand, okay, if we wanted to alleviate that problem, we would at least invest a bit of time in understanding how marketing can improve this. So having consistency in your leads, okay, how to communicate your message, how to communicate your brand, how to attract customers that are expecting value, that have a high standard, but are willing to pay a premium, right? We can do that through marketing, okay? If I wanted to only target bald men in the city of Baltimore, okay, I can do that. That's what I'm referring to is it's never been easier, all right? These algorithms, how many of you guys think that your phone is listening to you? How many of you guys say something around your phone and boom, all of a sudden these ads start popping up? Anybody having that experience? I think you'd be lying to me if you said no. Right? Everybody. Okay. Why do you think that is? It's got everything to do with what I'm talking about, right? When you have good marketing, you can target the exact type of customer you want to do business with. Right? We're all giving up signals. If you have Facebook right now, there's nothing less than 5,000 data points about you. Right? We're in the modern world now where all of that is up for sale to the right marketer. Your job now is to get to that marketing stream and understand what profitable is in marketing. Okay. Here's another way, and I'm going to ask the question. You don't have to answer it, but like I would say the majority of contractors that I encounter see marketing as an expense, as an overhead. And you know how I know that? Because the ones that cut their marketing, the earliest, they get a little busy and, oh, I got to shut down my marketing, usually are the ones that are struggling. All right. If it's not in that exact moment, it's 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road, because they don't understand having a consistency pipeline. They don't understand that you don't turn this stuff on and off. Okay. They don't understand what the cost is to acquire a customer. All right. Most important number in marketing. Don't let anyone tell you any different. If you can consistently acquire a customer and that rate is covered in what you're charging and you have a profit left over, congratulations, you have scale. Okay. So another way to kind of look at this when you get to the right marketing, and this is exactly how we measure it. All right. Cost to acquire a customer. For us, it's $1,286. And that'll fluctuate between $75 throughout the year. Okay. Now, my average ticket price right now is $56,000. Okay. So how many of you, all right, and that's at a 33% average net profit. Okay. How many of you sitting here right now, knowing that, all right, would spend as much as you could? So basically I can put a $1.21 in the pipeline here. All right. At the end, I'm getting $4. All right. Every 90 days, just like clockwork, over and over again. How many of you guys would keep putting in the $1.26? Almost like a no-brainer, right? That's exactly what I'm explaining to you about when you understand the marketing, when you've invested. Yes, not all marketing is like that. You have to find you have to work with the right people for sure. All right. You have to, more importantly, take ownership of who you do business with best. Okay. Who is your ideal customer? All right. What is it that you offer that makes you unique, that helps you to stand out and gets more yes than no? All right. Have you raised your prices to a point where you're a premium contractor? If the answer is yes to that, then, and the only thing that's standing between you and, growing a profitable, sustainable business is marketing, then you know exactly where you need to be focused. Okay. So again, when we're paying for ads, let's say we're spending 50 to $100 a day, right? Google Meta. All right. And that's generally, a lot of you guys can get by with that. That could be the difference between doing 800,000 or $1 million, okay, and doing $2 million. That is sincerely the line, right? Getting that locked in. So again, and doing it profitably. I'll tell you from my own perspective, my overall goal, all right, is to profitably spend $35,000 a month in marketing. That's where I want to be. Okay. What does that represent? About $1.5 million a month. Right. So $1.5 million back in profitable sales for 30, like I'm sure everyone would take that bet. Right. It's pretty sustainable. We do it month over month. Okay. You want to get to that same thing. So we start to see our marketing as an investment. All right. And the pathway to freedom versus an expense or a roadblock that's standing in our way. Okay. If you think that, the marketing expense or you've had a bad experience, get over it. All right. Get over it. It's working for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of contractors. All right. And there is no way to scale without it. All right. You will not be able to scale and have freedom and have a business that operates without it. Okay. Bottom line. So get over it. So let's just do a quick check here. How many of these 5 have you actually done? All right. So again, I want you guys to count your numbers here. How many of you guys on this call have fired your worst client? How many of you guys have fired your worst clients? Okay. Give yourself a check for that. How many of you guys know for sure and can validate that you've priced in the top 25%? Okay. How many of you guys have multiple crews? How many of you guys have moved yourself off the tools and, have multiple crews? Or multiple people waiting on bench for you if you're using employees, have 5 people waiting on your warm bench for every 1 employee. Okay, we don't talk about that enough, but again, when we're thinking about things in that order, right, you have 2 resources you have to be abundant about. That's your opportunity coming in and then your resources for getting it done. Okay. So we want to make sure that we are abundant and we're taking advantage of those things. And all of those things, by the way, you acquire through marketing, whether you realize it or not, right? Marketing and sales is exactly the same as hiring and recruiting. Exactly the same. No one, like when I say that to people, they're like, they have no idea. All right. Test me on it. You'll see. All right. They're the exact same thing. And you should be doing both of them at the exact same time with the exact same energy. Okay. And if you're not good at them, this is where you want to start to look and improve. All right. How many of you guys have hired a closer and got out of the sales seat or fixed your sales process, where it requires very little of you? Okay. And then your lead machine, predictable pipeline. How many of you guys can honestly say, again, you're producing an equivalent number of leads? Do we have 15 to 30 leads for our sales team, every single week? Do we have 100, whatever we require? All right. So again, and understanding that, like, listen, that the pathway to growth, all right, is through these channels. Now, is there conditions to that? Yeah, absolutely. There's levels to this game. Believe me. You want to have a sales team? Cool. The difference there, you want to have a very productive and profitable sales team. Don't think you're just going to hire a closer or the first guy that, offers their services as a salesperson, all right, and bring them into chaos where they don't get tracked, they don't get performance rated, they don't get any training, they don't get any how they operate the business, and they're just going to, magically produce these results for you. That is a pipe dream that will not happen. Okay. More so in sales, but all in the other areas of your business as well. Okay. So again, you want to build structure. You want to have the benefits of the things I'm talking about today. Understand that you're not done working just by doing these things entirely. In fact, most guys do exactly what I've said. They go and hire a closer. All right. But they haven't even thought about their sales process. Maybe they can run it. Right. But it's cumbersome and clunky, and it takes the sales rep 6 months, just to learn how to do their quote, and they have all these conditions and they have to lead by you shoulda and you coulda. All right. Even if they were a good sales rep, they're not going to stick around long. All right. They're not going to stick around long. Nobody would. There's no security there. There's no opportunity to grow. All right. So we need to think about it a little bit deeper. And again, getting that sales process dialed in, having it proven, having it so easy, all right, that a child could do it. That's where you see the explosive growth. That's where it makes sense to have these people. But if you don't have an onboarding process, if you don't have, ways to measure and scale, all right, ways to understand and keep salespeople motivated, all right, you will suffer greatly in this area for sure. Okay. So again, I hope that you guys are receiving the message I'm trying to share with you. I know it's sometimes hard to digest, and there's lots of potential here to talk yourself out of taking action. Okay. If you're here today, I want nothing more from you, all right, in all of this for you to take one action step. Okay. I'm not about the fluff. I'm not about, giving you theory or anything like that. I'm an actual contractor. All right. I've been through everything you could do wrong in a business. All right. I've suffered for decades and trying to figure this stuff out myself, or a decade, I should say. All right. I've been through this. All right. And I only want to share with you the things that made a difference, not the things that, you know, your coach or whoever's never done it before has suggested, or the internet. Okay. But it only ever comes down to this. And this is the one thing that separates the people who make it and the people who don't. Okay. It's about taking action. So if you heard something today that resonated with you, all right, I only want this. I want you to take action on it. However, you're going to do it. Okay. And I've given you plenty of clues on it. Pick that one thing, right? Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till next week. Don't put it on your dream list. Don't put it on, your wall. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want you to take it. If you're going to put it in your calendar, I want you to take action today. I want you to take one step, do one thing, right? If you're going to invest, I would suggest go rate your customers. I've given you the tool. I've given you no reason not to do it. Okay? Take that action and you're going to see the result. Okay? Don't let yourself continue to be in the same pattern, the same thing day after day. This business will grind you down and beat you up And at the end of the day, you'll have nothing to show for it. And I can't think of a sadder reality for as much as we put into these businesses and the energy and the heart and the blood and the sweat and the tears, all right, to do nothing to help yourself. Okay. So again, I hope I've at least got some of these points across to you. I hope you understand what I'm saying. If you don't, all right, and you're prepared to take action and you need some more help with what those actions will be, I'm going to quickly tell you again, for anyone that doesn't understand or doesn't know, we're a consultant, all right, a little bit different than a coach. This may seem like a coaching thing, but we actually fix the problems in your business. If the problems that you're dealing with are, require more than you, our team comes in and we actually fix these things. So again, we build them, implement proven systems. We don't coach you on them necessarily. We actually install them for you. So if you're interested in anything along those lines, and maybe you've gone as far as you can go with your expertise, feel free to reach out. We can have a chat about it, see what your needs are. If we can help you, we certainly will. If we can't, we'll send you the right direction. So as I wrap this up, love to give anybody the opportunity. If you had any questions, anything that I've said that that does resonate with you that you're going to take action on, feel free to throw that in the chat. All right. Appreciate everybody's time today. And again, take one step today. All right. Doesn't matter. Done is better than perfect. Okay. I'm not looking for perfect. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.